Oh boy, looks like there's a big change on YouTube again, and you know how everyone around here reacts to those. In this case, Susan Wojcicki has stepped down as CEO and is being replaced by Neil Mohan. I hope I pronounced that right. And oh, do I have some things to say about this. Now, before we begin with this new CEO and what direction YouTube will take, let's look back on Susan. Susan Wojcicki first took over as CEO in 2014, which honestly was a bit earlier than I expected. And things didn't go too badly, right away. Now that Susan has left, it seems that some people are a bit ready to give her some more leeway than normal, especially given what we now know about her successor. Is this newfound leniency deserved? Now, I can't really think of anything that happened within the first couple years of Susan's career that were well and truly major things. Sure, there were issues with the copyright system, but that's been going on for ages now, and seemed to show no sign of stopping. No, things really started to get bad in 2017. Between changes to the community guidelines and demonetization, certainly now a lot of people would consider YouTube before and after 2017 to be borderline unrecognizable. Some would argue this was because of certain events on YouTube. Others would say this was simply times changing in general. Hell, some people would even argue that this, along with other changes online, happened in response to the election of a certain person. I think you know the one. Look, the major question is, was this Susan's doing, or was she more along for the ride? And, no, it was the first one. It was definitely the first one. Some people are trying to argue now that, oh, we're learning now that she was just Neil's puppet, and she took the brunt of the blame for everything. But honestly, I don't really see it. Mind you, I don't know precisely how YouTube's internal structure works, but she still had plenty of power in the company, given how anyone who managed to have close enough ties to her could ask her to undo anything that happened to their channel, and it would magically happen. I'm looking at you, H3H3. And ironically enough, I think that one of YouTube's biggest issues has been how willing it is to capitulate to advertisers at the first sign of trouble. Normally, I'm not a fan of a big company throwing their weight around, but if they're going to, at least do it in favor of your users. I hate to say it, but pull a page out of Zuckerberg's book. When advertisers threatened to leave his platform, he basically said, "Fine, let me know when you're ready to come back." But instead, YouTube would roll over at the slightest murmur that there might be trouble, to the detriment of literally everyone else. Also, community guidelines enforcement has gotten way worse, and I'll talk about the community guidelines later on in this video, but the biggest problem is that they've not only put in new rules now, which, mind you, can retroactively apply to older videos, but some don't even make sense with how they're applied. But hey, enough about Susan. She's gone now. Let's talk about what's going to happen now. I have 6 scenarios here that I think might very well happen to YouTube in the future. So yeah, let's see what happens. Scenario 1. YouTube remains more or less the same. Now, something you should know about Neil is that he was apparently a really big advocate for a lot of the modern YouTube issues we have. Even stuff like removing the dislike button or the worst demonetization guidelines. So honestly, the few things that Susan did look at and say, wow, this is stupid, might end up getting through anyway, because of course they will. But you know what? Let's say that for some reason, nothing changes. I still don't think that won't stop another adpocalypse because someone sneezed incorrectly in a video, or that one day someone will decide, hey, what if we just make this platform worse for no reason? But again, for the sake of this argument, everything stays the same. YouTube is still bad, but I guess it could be worse. I would still prefer someone who could make the website better, but whatever, I guess. Scenario 2. YouTube gets better. Okay, now this one is just funny to me. YouTube getting better, under the guy who advocated for some of the worst YouTube decisions? I don't think I even need to continue this scenario, since it's simply so far-fetched. I know how YouTube could be made better, which I'll discuss later into this video. I just don't see it happening under this guy, though. But hey, maybe he could prove me wrong. Scenario 3. YouTube gets worse. Now, it's hard to imagine how things could get worse, until they happen. I also don't want to speculate as to things YouTube could make worse, in case I inadvertently give them ideas. But given what we've gone through before, whether for one reason or another, this is a very distinct possibility. I hope it doesn't happen, but I won't be surprised if it does. So, yeah, prepare for a bumpy ride if this happens, I guess. Scenario 4, the government gets involved. Okay, so this might seem a bit silly, but this one won't surprise me at all. There are actually two ways the government might get involved. This first one involves some sort of antitrust lawsuit against Google and/or YouTube. Now this might sound crazy, but at the same time there are lawsuits of that nature currently going through the courts. The big question here would be, how would this even work? Sure, it'd be one thing if YouTube got spun off from Google, it'd be another if YouTube itself was broken up. I'm really trying to envision how this would play out. How do you break up YouTube? I mean, I personally wouldn't, even if I think it isn't necessarily unreasonable to put certain restrictions in place, if nothing else. In fact, speaking of that, Scenario 5, the government gets involved, Option 2. This one is also actually more possible than you might think, but it could go very well or very poorly. There's a certain portion of the government right now really eager to modify or even get rid of Section 230, which is that thing which protects social media companies from certain liabilities. They like to argue that Section 230 wasn't ever intended to give these companies the complete ability to nuke videos or entire accounts for any reason they wanted. Whether you believe that or not is up to you. But yeah, the elephant faction here in the US is arguing censorship. How would this impact YouTube? Well, this could go one of two ways. Either Congress carefully and surgically modifies Section 230 just enough that YouTube can't arbitrarily nuke accounts for no reason, but also not making them liable for literally everything, or they delete the entire thing from existence because they think it'll be funny or something. I hope it'll be that first one, but honestly that second one won't surprise me one bit because, yeah, I don't think they know what they're doing. Oh, or the Supreme Court could just sort of delete it from existence at some point. I guess we'll see how that goes though. Scenario 6. YouTube just sort of implodes on itself. YouTube imploding in on itself is highly unlikely, but at the same time if it happens, it won't surprise me. I think the big thing keeping YouTube afloat for so long is simply how many people are here, and how difficult it would be to start up anything competitive. So even bad decision after bad decision, YouTube still remains. But okay, you've heard a lot of complaining about this from me. How should things be fixed anyway? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to tell you how I would fix YouTube if given the opportunity. Okay, going from least to most important here, let's fix the layout. So to start off, can we have some of the old layouts back? Particularly on the channel side. Because I'm sorry, but I really don't like the newer layouts. In fact, I haven't liked a modern layout since Cosmic Panda, and even that was really controversial for its time. Each layout has gotten more and more boring, obnoxious, and sucked more and more of the soul from channel pages in particular. Channel pages used to be super customizable. Now they just sort of exist. I understand part of it is to be uniform with mobile, but something YouTube and Microsoft should both know is that my computer isn't a phone. Oh, and as a general design rule, can we ditch flat icons and styles in general? Especially whatever these designs are for illustrations and such. Allegria or Corporate Memphis or whatever the hell it's called anymore. Even in the best of cases, it's simply obnoxious to see everywhere. In the worst of cases, this sort of flat and supposedly sleek UI design is harder to navigate than the older UI designs. Plus,
it's boring!
Bring back dislikes. YouTube, why do I need an extension to bring back what was once a staple feature? Oh, wait, it's because it was damaging to creators and their mental health, right? If that was really the case, then why did you keep dislikes in the studio then? And hey, speaking of the studio, if you really care about creators and their mental health, why is it that the first thing you see every time you open the studio is, hey, here are all the detailed numbers for how your channel is doing and how well or poorly your latest video did? Sure, some people might like that, but I'm aware of plenty of people who find that downright stressful. And oh look, there's no ability to dismiss that either. Oh, and by the way, removing dislikes hasn't helped anyone aside from making it easier for scammers to get away with scamming people. So good job on that one, guys. Next, we have guidelines for both monetization and community guidelines. Now, to condense what was once a very long segment down, I'd make a couple small changes to the community guidelines. In fact, here's what the rules would be in a nutshell. Don't do anything illegal. Yeah, okay, shocker, I know. I just think that much more than that leads to trouble. The community guidelines as they are now are just a mess of questionable and selectively enforced rules. And I don't think that most of them are necessarily bad rules on their own. I think they're all well-intentioned rules, but they're also just not very good at their actual job. And that's a big problem. Stacking on a bunch of rules only for them to be selectively enforced as well is just really annoying to me, and I don't think it helps anyone. It just leads to more confusion. But again, keeping this section way shorter than it was prior so that it doesn't devolve into a 10-minute long rant. As for monetization guidelines, honestly I would throw the company's weight around a bit. I don't want to make enemies out of the advertisers, but neither would I do the modern YouTube thing of rolling over to them at the slightest hint of trouble. Also, for both systems, appeals if nothing else need to be done by a human every single time. I'm tired of systems where the bot has reviewed its own decision and decided that its own decision was correct. Obviously, it'd be preferable to have that on both the first to report and on appeal, but at least have it on the appeals. Actually have the ability to communicate to a human about the issue. Also, speaking of which, let's talk about the strike system. I personally believe that there should be a cooldown or grandfathering in period for strikes. As in, if you've had your video up for years, but then suddenly several years later one of the bots goes haywire and decides it doesn't like your video. Now, we can argue about whether it should or shouldn't be taken down at all, but there should not be strikes involved for it. There shouldn't be the ability to retroactively hand out strikes, let alone for videos from several years ago, which is why I say there should be a 1-year window, 2 years tops, where you can receive strikes. Again, video removals are a bit different, but not strikes. This is doubly so for those with large back catalogs of videos, because most people can't remember exactly every single thing they said or did in a video from years prior, especially not when that's one of hundreds or possibly even thousands of videos. Oh, also, while we're at it, can we have the warning strike reset? Maybe make it take a bit longer than an ordinary strike to reset. Maybe a year, but I think it should reset, honestly. Oh, and copyright. Honestly, I'd put in systems where the moment you appeal a decision, any money made from the video goes into an account where it sits in holding. Also, if a company is using YouTube's Content ID system, as part of the agreement, YouTube is allowed to act as a mediator of sorts. Instead of appealing to the exact same people who made the claim, and them saying, nah, I don't really feel like it. And as a last thing, maybe allow for proportional claiming of revenue from videos. So if you get a copyright claim for 1 minute of footage in a 10-minute video, then they get 10% of the earnings while you receive the rest. I know revenue sharing sort of exists, but it's a bit messy in its implementation, and completely optional. But yeah, that's what I'd do if I was put in charge of YouTube. You know, hypothetically, of course. I mean, unless I somehow get put in charge of YouTube. That'd be neat. But hey, YouTube, if you want some help, you know where to find me. But that's all for now. Thank y'all for watching, and take care.